Hello, everyone. We're live. Hopefully, just now. Not sure if we got that right in first.
I don't think so.
So let's start the show because we got so much to get into right now. So, hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, February 20th, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Jesse.
I'm Russ Cohen at home.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And man, oh man, we've already had some things happen today. There's been a lot of chatter today, a whole lot of chatter. And I do the podcast today reluctantly, thinking that something's going to for sure happen while we're on the air today, because it really feels like there are so many things being discussed.
Well, that would be a good thing. That would be a good thing because then we can talk about it. Be the first people to talk about it.
We started talking off with so Gabranson's been signed today, and I think that's a good launching point. Oh man, am I gonna do this again? Jesus. Holy cow.
Strobe.
All right, I'll be right back. Start talking about the Gabranson sign. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Goodbranson.
It's got to be his camera. Okay.
So I just put up on Goodbranson. I just put up a tweet because I saw Cap Friendly tweeted out some comparable contracts. So I went and used a nice little site from Dominic Gameshi, Own the Puck. And I just look, the basic sort of underlying numbers. Goodbranson basically compares with Dmitry Kulikov. They're almost equal. And Kulikov's getting 4.3.
Right.
There were some people in Winnipeg who were a little upset with that last summer, but he's quietly become one of the more dependable defensemen on the Jets. He's not a point getter. He's nothing flashy. He just does his job.
Yeah.
If Goodbranson can be that, it's maybe not a horrible deal. It's just a curious move is more what it is, right?
You know what it is, Peter? The fact that Kulikov came off a terrible year in Buffalo, and being here in Buffalo, I know the reason why, because I was at the game where he got hurt. He got pushed into the boards right where the bench was, and the door had opened, and he hurt his back, and he was labored all year because of that bad back. So it affected them, and then Winnipeg paid $4 million for I think 3 years, and people were surprised that he got that much coming off a bad year. Gabranson, he's had his injury problems, and he's not exactly a darling of the analytics crowd, but he's a solid, big, right-hand shot defenseman, and he, $4 million for three years is not a linked term. I mean, most players, 25 or 26, are getting 6 and 7 years, and he's getting 3. So I
Plus, he also gives you a real physical element, and that's something where any team could use that. And me personally, I would take Gabranson over Kulikov because I don't care about that little bit of offense that Kulikov has. I'd rather have the physicality that Gabranson and strength that he has.
He, and as Mike said, he's not an analytics darling by any stretch, but neither is Kulikov.
Right.
And the thing with Kulikov, and I use this as a comparison because I see the guy play a lot, is they're not dissimilar, but Goodbranson is a more physical player. And, until we have robots play in the game, you're always going to have a belief of a level of physical play that's necessary in the mix of how you play the game.
During the next lockout, they'll have robots, Peter.
Yeah, it's coming, right? The game isn't completely played on numbers, and whether Benning's right or wrong, we'll find out. But I don't think it's the worst possible outcome for the Canucks on this.
No, I like it. I think it's a great signing, and I've been talking about it for about a week now. That it sounded like it was heading this way.
Chris, there were some people who thought that a Tanev deal, because there was talk from Elliot Friedman over the weekend that the teams have been calling on Tanev, and the interest had risen on him, and he's injured right now, like he is most of the time. But that there was still interest, and Toronto was one of the teams. Well, came out, and I cannot remember who the Canuck beat reporter was. Rick Dallowall, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And he said that the injury to Tanev is more extensive than first thought. It was actually a fracture in his leg, and he's going to be out another 3 or 4 weeks at least. Now that means that puts it in the middle of March, and I'll tell you right now, nobody is trading for Chris Tanev, especially with the amount that they're going to expect. And no playoff team will trade for him. with that uncertainty in terms of injury. So I would bet that Tanev is off the market until the summer. But with Gabranson signing a deal, they may be now interested in trading Tanev to clear some salary.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think it's a little bit. There's something you have to think about with this trade deadline a little bit more than we've had to think about in the past. This just doesn't involve the buyers and sellers. There are teams involved. There are teams out there who like Chris Tanev, who might not be, necessarily going to make the playoffs, and you wouldn't think of as buyers, but who could see this as an opportunity right now, and that they're looking at him long term. They're not looking. They don't care if he gets there in March or April, but they also don't want to wait till the craziness that's going to be the draft. There's teams that might jump on here. I think that's what I've been hearing, at least, and I wouldn't be shocked if Buffalo was one of those teams. That kind of situation still is very much alive.
Well, that only makes sense, Eck, if the price is reasonable. And according to the reports about Tanev, the Canucks are expecting a special offer, unquote, for Tanev. A special offer.
Not the price is reasonable if the team likes the player enough. Honestly, what it comes down to is, reasonable price on a player like him is so difficult to put because, like you've said, he's been injured a lot and he's been out a ton. So what is reasonable and what is, you're not going to get him for a reasonable price. That's just not going to happen because there's enough people out there right now who still believe that there's enough upside that he could get healthy and that his injuries might just be a young thing and that he's going to get, as he gets older, he's going to become a healthy player. So if somebody likes him, that's always I'm often reminded about this from people, from sources I talk to. Like I talk to a lot of older scouts who laughingly say to me, you've got to remember that you guys talk about, this and this possibility, this possibility. You gotta remember that there is still this thing called someone just liking him. There's somebody out there, for us, it's like there are people who just like other players who are going for them. And and that doesn't necessarily, they're not analytics. We're not talking about, they just like the player.
Yeah, they liked him in their draft year. They never had a chance to get him. Now they have a chance.
Right, they have a chance, so they're going to jump on this chance before. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that the funny thing is, as the trade deadline is shifted from the trade deadline has become sort of a different. I've been writing a story about this, been trying to get it up, but there's been too many rumors happening. There, for a long time, the trade deadline was very much a setup for the playoffs, and it still is a setup for the playoffs, but it also now is a setup for the summer. And the trade deadline, as we've seen in the past, like Jonathan Drouin's a perfect example, right? Is a time when teams feel out. I think that's what's happening with Erik Karlsson right now. I don't think Erik Karlsson's going to get traded, and we all don't think that. But Ottawa sure as heck wants to know who's interested and wants to know what they could possibly get.
Yeah, I think so. Because that's again, Karlsson might get offered to whoever gets the top pick just to see if they'll bite.
Right.
Well, it's interesting, and I don't know this person, but there was a CTV reporter out of Ottawa who had a little snippet on Karlsson, that the Senators are going to be taking offers all week. Now, I agree with you, Aki. I don't think Karlsson's being moved, but the one little nugget that he placed in this tweet that was interesting was that Bobby Ryan's contract would have to be included along with Karlsson. Good luck.
Only Vegas can take that. Nobody can take that.
I wish
Vegas or Arizona.
I still wish I had a staff mic and I could bring back to 3 weeks ago when I said that exact thing on this show, and you guys all said good luck exactly then. No, because that's
I still say it now. Yeah,
there's no question that I'm not saying, I'm not disagreeing with the good luck statement. I'm just saying that has been absolutely what's been done for about a month now. At least.
Well, all I can say is Pierre Dorian has been dipping into the hallucinogens if he thinks he's going to get an NHL general manager to take Bobby Ryan's $7.2 million contract when the guy can't find a Kevlar glove to keep his hands from breaking.
Think for a second, I'm not saying that. Maybe Dorian doesn't think that anyone's going to go for that, okay? Maybe Dorian just wants to have the conversation and wants to see what's going on. And he doesn't really want to trade Karlsson right now. So you put in the Bobby Ryan thing and you say, okay, by the way, we want Bobby Ryan in the deal right now, but if we're going to, tell us what you might do if not Bobby Ryan, but we're not trading him right now unless you take Bobby Ryan as well. And that kind of conversation I've heard has been going on. That's the kind of situation that we've seen, and that's not uncommon among GMs at all. And now what is interesting, to finish my thought, is that with the trade deadline shifting to the draft, which has actually been a more exciting time for trades than any other time in the year now, the draft is, there are some people in the league who hate it, who hate the fact that that goes on, because there are some general managers and teams who really want to focus on the draft at the draft and not making trades at the draft. And I've talked to people like this who say, they're ticked off that they realize the salary cap and the way, July 1st falls and all that stuff has led a natural occurrence for this to happen. You have more money to spend at the draft and all that stuff. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some general managers who, if they see something can get done now, won't take a shot at it, because that does help your plans, because you got to remember the amount, and Russ has been involved in this a lot more than I have, but the amount of planning that goes on prior to a draft is intense. And when there's a trade that's hanging out there as well, that could change everything to what you're trying to think.
If a team's not in the playoffs, they're planning now.
Right? Oh, yeah. So in 2014, Kevin Cheveldayoff had a very active trade deadline by doing basically nothing.
Yep.
But in his press conference after, he said, there are a lot of ideas presented to me that I want to come back and revisit. Now, it was Kevin Cheveldayoff. He did have to do nothing again, but and I just say that in fun because he stuck to his plan. But he admitted what you're saying, Ak, is that a lot of seeds get planted. A lot of things happen that make you think about other things going forward. And as we know, there's, and it was definitely this way last year, is, with the expansion draft and stuff, the draft has become almost the second trade deadline.
I would say
the amount of activity happens.
It's the first trade deadline, actually.
It's the first trade deadline. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only way to remedy that, Ak, and I share that because, like I said, I always look forward to this time of year. I love the trade deadline. I love the rumors and everything. And more than likely, it's not going to change until the next CBA. But, Brian Burke's invention of salary retention before the last CBA has helped out a little bit. But I think that what's going to happen is some sort of Larry Bird exemption or something like that in the new CBA to allow more flexibility, because that's what's killing the deadline is the lack of flexibility.
We talked about this for years, Mike, you and I, on this podcast, and whether it was video, radio forums, going way back to when we were just doing it on the phone. And I've always called it the Ray Bork rule, which is what you need. I think you need the rule that is, you can trade for one pending UFA and not have it affect your salary cap, because that pending UFA doesn't mean anything. Like, what you're doing is you're hurting the teams with pending UFAs, who could actually get something for them by the fact that you can't pick them up. So why not be allowed to trade for one pending UFA that doesn't hit your cap? You can't do it until the beginning of February or something, like, but make a time.
Or every team gets a prorated amount of cap space from the trade deadline on that you can use for pending UFAs or RFAs.
Right. Just that. Right. Just say just that. And
so it's not just one. You could maybe get three depending on the salary if it fits in the prorated amount.
And do you see anybody who this doesn't help? I mean, this helps the teams trying to go for the Stanley Cup. This helps the teams trying to rebuild. This helps everybody. And to me, if you're trying to, I have brought this up. I've had lunch with Bill Daly and brought this up face to face with him, just the two of us. This, along with the 3 points for overtime for regulation win, are my two biggest things I always bring up. And the 3 points for overtime win, I get the clearly we're afraid that teams would be too separated apart, and there would be, that's what the NHL feels. There's no two ways about that. But this thing, they don't really have an answer for. They simply say, well, that would just, again, benefit the rich teams. That's the answer. Because, okay, if you're already at the cap and now there's a $9 million UFA out there, well, prorated $9 million or whatever, you're going to have to pay $2 million to, say. How many teams can pay $2 million? Only the rich teams. So, again, the thinking is that, you would get Toronto, Philly, New York, and those kind of teams would get in on this for sure. But other teams like Nashville,
selling
not going to go out and get a $2 million player. That's their logic.
If you're a selling team, you love this, because the thing you want, if you've got a $2 million player, like let's use Grabner right now.
Right.
Let's use Grabner as an example. If you're and say Grabner's on Phoenix or on Arizona, okay, let's just swap that. If you're Arizona, you love this, because then you get the Jets, the Leafs, whoever, a bunch of teams, maybe the Flyers, who would pick a bunch of teams bidding up. So your return becomes way better, because all of a sudden you've opened the market up.
And my argument back,
brilliant way of doing it.
Teams suddenly, maybe the richer teams do get better, but some of the teams who are making these, who are trying to get rid of these UFAs, are actually saving money by doing this. So they end up saving that money. And if you're going to go for it, I mean, the reason you go and add $2 million in like a Ray Bork type deal or whatever, the reason you do that is because of the potential playoff revenue that's there, right? That's the whole concept. That I mean, obviously you want to win, but just business perspective, the whole concept is that.
Well, we need to talk about the trades, but just as one final point.
Let me talk about Grabner for a second, and let me go into Grabner over here because
okay,
and then we'll move to Mrazek and other things too, because they do affect things. And one last thought, sorry, because this is a topic I feel strongly about. Whenever I see a player that's a major player, like a McDonough, for example, start to get talked about in February, but not really before that, I really think about that this is a feeler situation. That's always been the case. Now, I don't know what's happening here, but along those lines, Grabner, who has been, rumored to be moved, and today, Nick Holden, which we're going to talk about next, is moved. But Grabner, suddenly I was overcome. Like right after Nick Holden was traded, two things happened on my phone. My phone lit up with two different things. One, that Grabner was going to Pittsburgh. That's happening. Just forget about it. And someone told me I could put an E5 on it, and I'm not going to do that because it's not a done deal. But that's how convinced they were that Grabner was going to Pittsburgh. And the second thing that I was told, was that because Holden is gone to Boston, that means Green has been traded and is probably heading to Tampa, because Boston was also involved in talking for Mike.
Well, the only thing that would make me hesitate about Grabner and Pittsburgh, and I think Pittsburgh is looking for, depth, scoring, third line, that type of guy, is that Grabner's not a center, and they desperately need a center. And that's why I think it's going to be somebody other than Grabner, but it's somebody like him, somebody who's on the an expiring contract, who's not making a ton of money, that Pittsburgh can fit in the cap. Regarding
like him. Yep.
Right, regarding
just saying that this, and it fits in with some of the Pittsburgh's been laying out some clues the past couple of days. They've been the other day. One of them told me, we are going to get faster, which is pretty crazy because Pittsburgh's a pretty fast team. That the player they were going to get at the trade, and immediately Grabner jumps into your head there too because of of his speed. So I know he's not a center, but maybe there's something else happening too, or maybe they just are willing to move somebody to center. Like maybe there's somebody that they think they can move to center and put Grabner on the wing.
They don't really have.
We could trade for Nick Petan.
Sorry, go ahead.
They really don't have anybody on their roster right now that can make that move to the middle. Otherwise, they would have done it already, because they're playing Riley Sheehan as a third line center and Riley Sheehan as a fourth line center, and that's not any kind of slag against Riley Sheehan. It's just not good offensively.
It's Riley Sheehan and Carter Rowney. Like they have to get somebody. You're not going into the Stanley Cup that way. So
But tell me this: if Riley Sheehan could Riley Sheehan become a third line center if Grabner's on his wing? Like there's something.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, I disagree with Mike. He can.
I was going to say, if Shiro's sitting there listening to the podcast, which he should be thinking about Nick Petan.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Petan's better. What X says is true, but the problem is that then you're moving like either Jake Gensel or Brian Rust, somebody like that, to the fourth line, which you don't want to do either. I don't see it happening.
Right. Now, and the only other point I was going to make about the whole deadline thing and cap retention and flexibility is, I think that the NHL is underutilizing the fact that this is a big day rating-wise for the rights holders. For TSN and Sportsnet, it's a big day, and the fact that there's not a lot of news, I think, hurts them. There was talk during the negotiations for the CBA of having like all the teams meet in sort of like an NHL draft type of thing in one place, and having the deadline there, and having teams walk to each other's tables and negotiating and doing deals in front of everybody. And you telling me that wouldn't be exciting?
Rogers pitched that, and they wanted to do it in prime time too.
Right.
So, I mean, this is the interesting thing. Whatever people think about Rogers' broadcast and their talent or whatever, don't forget, these guys are there to build TV and build audiences.
Right.
And that's the thing that they're thinking of, is how do I get more people to tune in and watch my stuff if we can host this? And the reason they want that is because it would be everyone together. It would be exclusive to them, right? You wouldn't have TSN, just like you don't have TSN at the draft anymore and all those things. They've lost it. And they want to, they've still got, another 7 years?
No, it's 2022, so it's another 5 years. 4 years.
So, right. So, I mean, they want to keep building this. And that's, I think it's an interesting idea that the NHL actually should visit. But they also don't want to alienate other rights holders, too.
Right, exactly. Well, NHL Network and NBCSN would be free coverage if they cover the draft as well. So let's get into the trades. And I think X having some technical problems, so he'll be back any second here. The Peter Mrazek deal from last night, Russ, they get basically 2 conditional picks depending on whether they re-sign Mrazek after the year, whether they make the playoffs, and there's games played, connotations in there. It came out right after the deal that Neuwirth is out for not days but weeks, according to Ron Hextall. So they pretty much had a gun to their head to make this deal.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Elliott will be back, Ron Hextall said, before Michael Neuwirth. So just to let you know the extent of it, that's the extent of it. So there's that. They got Ron Hextall to ante up. Even Ron Hextall said today on TV, prices are high. I know there's always going to be discussion like, hey, this isn't that much. I'm going to tell you something. Fan reaction to conditional picks is always like you putting money on a credit card. It's great today, and then when the finance charges hit, then all of a sudden it's like, it wasn't as smart of a deal as I thought it was. And so this is a deal that helps both, but I'm telling you, these things that Ken Holland has attached to the conditions are very reachable, especially if Mrazek just gets a little coaching and just a little confidence. They're totally reachable. So if they get 2 picks out of a guy that they wanted out of there in the worst way because he wasn't fitting in with the team anymore, that's a win for both teams, a big win, especially for the Red Wings. I know people want to bag on the Red Wings. I was just in Detroit. Fans are upset. They were spoiled for so long with good teams. But you know what? This is a good trade.
Yeah, I like the trade. I like it on a whole bunch of levels. I don't think one team wins more than the other. I just think it's a smart deal for both sides. Philly needs a Band-Aid. The Red Wings need him out of there, and they need to get a little return for him. And there's a little bit of upside if things fit together. Not a bad deal.
Sticking with the Red Wings, and Act was reporting regarding Mike Green and Tampa, and that's been out there, and it makes a lot of sense because based on the price tag that the Rangers were asking for from Boston, that sort of got out, which was DeBrusk and Carlo and a number 1. I don't think Tampa is paying the equivalent price for McDonough, so the fallback in terms of an impact defenseman is either a Jack Johnson or a Mike Green. And, we know the Yzerman-Holland relationship, so it would lend itself to the possibility of that kind of deal. And I don't think he's a perfect fit, but he's definitely an improvement over some of the players that Tampa Bay is playing right now. So if that happens and they get a first-round pick on top of the conditional picks that they're getting for Mrazek, that's a pretty good haul for Ken Holland.
Yeah, no question. I think they will get a first-round pick in that deal.
Yeah, they'll definitely will. And then the interesting thing here, and I love this stuff. I just wrote about it, and I'll post it after the show. The rumor came out on Friday about the Leafs being interested in Luke Glendening from Detroit. Lou Lamoriello offered a 5th-round pick for Luke Glendening, who has another 3 years at less than $2 million, but is basically a 4th-liner. Ken Holland came back with a 2nd-round pick, asking for one of the Leafs' 2 second-round picks. That ended the discussion.
You got a little
now that's not
baggage going on there in this deal. I feel like this is like, okay, so this is basically Ken Holland saying, we know how much you like Luke Glendening.
Right.
So here,
But the Leafs are not going to trade a 2nd-round pick for a 4th-line guy. I mean, that's not what's going to happen. So, if they come back, but the thing is, Detroit has already let the cat out of the bag here. They've traded Mrazek. They're going to trade Green. They're probably going to trade a couple more guys. They're probably in a sort of quasi rebuild, and it's going to take them 2 or 3 years to get back to where respectability. And if that's the case, then what the hell do you want a 30-year-old Luke Glendening around? It makes more sense for them to trade. So Lamoriello is going to hold out and maybe have to give up lesser of a pick than a 2nd, because he's not giving up a 2nd-round pick for Luke Glendening.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I mean, the Red Wings, so on the while we're there, really quickly. So a couple things they have done as well. I mean, besides the Mrazek trade, which we should get into, we'll talk about in a second. I want to talk about the now rumor is that they're also taking calls on Jimmy Howard. So they've
been taking them all along on Howard.
They have been,
right? And
I do think there were more teams than we originally thought that were talking about Mrazek. Like I think the Flyers got caught up in a little bit of a game with them.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Flyers turned down a deal at one point before Neuwirth was hurt, and then came back. When Neuwirth was hurt, they basically had to give, what I was told, give more to get him. Like than the deal they turned down. I think the Islanders were heavy on Mrazek. I heard that. I heard the Islanders were heavy on Mrazek. I heard Calgary about Mrazek too, because there's a lot of questions on Mike Smith's health right now too.
Well, we were talking about the Mrazek deal while you were off the air. The Howard thing. Now, I have read some reports that say Mike Smith is not that hurt. He skated on Saturday that he's close to coming back, so it's not as serious. And the thing is, Jimmy Howard is over $5 million for next year. So there's no way that Calgary, with Rittich, with Gillies, and Smith all under contract next year, they're going to add Jimmy Howard. This is a team that doesn't have a ton of room.
Detroit has plenty of money. Okay, so Detroit has plenty of money next year too. So Detroit can easily take half that. Okay, right. That's not a question, at all. There's no doubt that the way Ken Holland's looking at this thing, they're breaking down the team, so they're not going to be they're going to have plenty of cap space to pay. They don't want Howard there, like they have we talked about Carreau right now, and then Rush, you talked about the goalie of the future who really isn't even there yet.
Yeah, Keith Petruzzi. He's right now playing his first year in Quinnipiac, so he's probably 4 or 5 years away.
Okay, right. But in the meantime, they really like, the kid from Grand Rapids has, been doing really well. And I think that they are going. They would not mind at all if they could get somebody to take Howard at half the price. I think they would do it. I think they would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, would Calgary pay half the price? Calgary's right on that bubble of the playoffs. They really are. They're really right there. And from what I heard, I've talked to people about Mike Smith as well, and one person I talked to said, I know people are saying he's coming back Saturday, but he's not coming back Saturday. That's what he said to me. So maybe he is still, but he said that this injury is worse than they thought.
Well, no, he skated on Saturday. He may be another week or two, but right. I mean, what's going on here? And I don't think Calgary's the fit. I think the Islanders are a fit because Halak is up as a UFA at the end of this year, and they can handle Greiss and Howard as their goaltending tandem next year because Halak will be out of the way, and maybe Detroit won't have to eat as much money. And honestly, the Islanders need a goaltender, and I think should be willing to roll the dice on Howard because their goaltending tandem really stinks. And I think it's going to cost them a playoff spot if they continue with Greiss and Halak. Now, Greiss is out, and we don't know how long he's going to be out. So Christopher Gibson is not the answer for the Islanders.
No,
he's not.
No, and another Gibson is injured now as well, we're hearing, right?
Yep. Same in Vancouver. Just said Markstrom's injured too, and they just recalled Bachman. Like it's
There's
unreal.
a ton of injuries around the league. They just are.
Yeah.
Flyers pulled the trigger at the right point.
I'm surprised they didn't call up Demko unless they did.
No, they just want him to play straight through. I think they're not gonna call him up. And look, Wayne Simmons is also out for a couple weeks too.
But this has to be as much of a concern as the oft-injured Matt Murray is for Pittsburgh. The injuries to Gibson has to start being a concern for Anaheim. It cost them a chance at the Stanley Cup final last year, and I think they would have done better. They would have done better against Pittsburgh than a terribly injured Nashville team would have. And, Jonathan Bernier cost them a chance at the Stanley Cup final. Now they have Miller, but, Miller is still a good goaltender. So I think they prepared themselves for that. But the just consistent injuries of Gibson is really, it's lowering my, and it's all luck. I mean, it's all, it's unfortunate. But, I mean, I think that takes away from his value as a goaltender.
Yeah, no, it definitely takes away from his value. The Flyers are bringing up Oscar's Lindblom, right?
Oscar Lindblom, yeah. He'll be playing tonight.
Yep, who has been really good. I mean, he's been really good and I think he's the kind of guy the Flyers didn't want to bring in unless he was playing like a top 6 role. So I think that
he's gonna be a quasi Simmons while Simmons is gone.
Yeah, that's what they're gonna try to do. That's really where they are now. Let's talk about the Nick Holden deal. Back to that. So Nick Holden moved out to the Bruins today. Russ, what are your thoughts?
Well, the thoughts are Nick Holden's a very risky defenseman, as we all saw in the playoffs. When he's on the power play, he's great. He can score you the occasional goal. Sometimes the puck will bounce over his stick. Sometimes it won't when he's the only guy back there. So I think in the role the Rangers had him in, they had him in the wrong role. Like they had him as their top guy sometimes. They had him paired with, he needs to be a bottom pairing guy, second power play. In that role, he could do really well for the Bruins because he does have a good shot. He can get you a couple goals a series on the power play. And if Chara goes stone cold on the power play, he certainly could walk in on certain shifts and help out with that. So that's where I see the value for Boston. For the Rangers, Rob O'Gara is a Long Island kid, so he's certainly familiar with the area. He's 24. He's 6'4". He's around 210. I watched him with Yale. Every year he got better. The Bruins did play him a few games a year ago, and I thought he looked good. They're so deep right now. I can name you a ton of defensemen that Providence has. So he was never going to get a shot with them. So this is good for the Rangers because now he could walk in, maybe play a number 4 or number 6 role next year and get his feet wet. But this kid can skate. He's not a great skater, but he's a good enough skater. He's a really good puck mover. He's very strong. He'll give you the safe clears. He will play a very good, safe game and show some physicality. And that's a kind of defenseman right now the Rangers are lacking. And to trade that for Holden does really help them because Holden is a turnover guy at times.
Russ, do you think? I was just going to say, Russ, do you think the Bruins can shelter Holden a little bit from those mistakes? And given their depth in their organization, they can deploy him in favorable situations to eliminate that where the Rangers didn't really have that option.
They were exposed,
Yeah, put him with Adam McQuaid as more of a stay-at-home guy, maybe. And that would be the answer. Now, the thing is, from this, I think you can take 2 things. One, the Ryan McDonough to Boston stuff is over with because they wouldn't have done this deal if there was a chance at adding a McDonough or a Jack Johnson or a Green. So I think they've made their defensive move, and maybe they make a move for a forward if they think they need depth. The other thing is that the market has now been firmly established on the non-Green, non-Jack Johnson rentals. It's a 3rd-round pick. Kempney was a 3rd-round pick, and he wasn't a rental, but he's a quasi-rental in RFA. And now Holden for 3rd and O'Gara, so a 3rd plus. So a guy like Luke Shen, who's out there, and a couple other UFAs of a non-Green Johnson quality are going to get you a 3rd-round pick, and that's not a bad price. But it's not a deep market for those guys either.
No, but what it does show is that McDonough would get either a 1 or a 2nd and a 3rd and a really good prospect. That's what it shows.
Yeah. No, I think
if there's a buyer out there, they're paying.
Yeah, I think get a 1st-round pick. If they move McDonough now, if they move him at the trade deadline, they're getting a 1st-round pick for him.
I think they're getting more than that.
Yeah,
I think they're getting more.
That's part of it. As far as draft picks go, that's part of it.
I put McDonough in the same category as Ekman. Maybe he won't get as much, but he'll be in the same category as Ekman Larsson in the sense that he's going to get a first, probably an NHL player, and a prospect. Carlson is going to blow the doors off of everybody if he's actually on the market. But the rental guys, the Josh Georges of the world, they'll get a 3rd-round pick because that's the market.
So while I was gone there, the first 2 times was because I was somehow taken over by a green monster on Google and I changed computer. The last time I was gone just now was because I got a call saying the reason that Green hasn't happened yet is because of the simple fact that that Tampa has had talks about Carlson, and you will know that when Green goes, Carlson is not going anywhere. Like
that makes sense.
That is the only team that can actually do it.
Yeah.
The only team that can give Ottawa enough, and the only team that has enough to gain by getting Carlson for 2 playoffs. That's how Tampa sees it. So the deal is, and you hear a lot of people talking about this, but it is a big deal. Tampa's a team that's going to have a shot this year. They're going to have a shot next year. So you put Carlson in there for 2 guaranteed playoffs. It becomes worth it to make it a deal.
Those 2 years are the 2 years they have Kucherov signed on his current deal, and then they have to worry about that. Now let's play amateur GM here. If you're Dorian, what are you asking for? Being reasonable, what are you asking for from Tampa, Russ?
Well, I mean, again, we're assuming that no defenseman from the current lineup, other than Cuckoo, is really going to be available. So you're going to ask for Cuckoo. That's your starting point. Right. It's Erik Karlsson. So again, I want Tyler Johnson, but I will say that Tyler Johnson is not available. So
I think Tyler Johnson for Erik Karlsson. I've heard Tyler Johnson is available at the trade.
And he should be, but if it's not Tyler Johnson, then it should be one from and this is going to be like the Chinese menu. This is going to be like Palat, Killorn, or Nemestikov. One of those 3 have to be available.
It would be Nemestikov.
So if I could get Cuckoo, Nemestikov, a first, and some other draft pick, that's good. Or Cuckoo, Nemestikov, a first, and another player, then that's fine too. Like would they throw me Adam Ernie? Maybe, because they're throwing him in the lineup right now. But is he going to stay? I don't know. But that's a tantalizing piece for them too.
Here's what I
think it would have. Okay, well, let's all guess, but let's all guess and then tell us what you heard.
I have no guesses. I mean, it's going to be massive, and it's and in some way, and I'll just say this: in some way, Yzerman is going to have to give up something he'd prefer not to part with, and he's going to have to weigh the cost benefit of how much impact can Karlsson have on me for 2 years versus what I'm going to lose over the next 2 years, and that's going to be the sticking point in this. So it's going to be big.
I would bet that if along the lines of Russ's offer, that it's the 2 players and either their first picks this year or next year, 18 and 19, or one pick and a guy like a Cal Foote or a Volkov, another really good prospect. Because you're talking about Karlsson, they're not going to trade him unless they get 3 or 4 assets.
Yeah.
Now Tampa could throw. That first rounder could be a 2019, and Ottawa would be good with that because, hey, 2019 does have a pretty good draft. Tampa knows there's no way they're going to lose Jack Hughes, who'd be the first overall pick, because they're not going to bottom out. So, that is a way to get around this too, is for them to, if there's someone that they like in the draft this year, give them a 2019 first.
What did you hear?
What I heard, okay? I'm going to bring up my notes here because this is the slew of players, so I'm going to throw. It's not going to be all these players, but these are players that have been discussed in this whole thing. So there's a goalie. I have not figured out who it is. It's not Vasilevsky, obviously, but it's one of their top goalie prospects. No one's told me who, but that Ottawa wants a goalie in the Karlsson deal. That's not the big deal. Tyler Johnson, Cuckoo has been mentioned, like you guys both said. Taylor Radish has been mentioned. Okay, who's a possible prospect. And Callan Foote has been mentioned.
Right.
Who I guess is from.
But these are longer term guys. I mean,
that's what Ottawa's doing. Remember, that's what they're thinking now. So they're thinking long.
They still have to sell tickets too.
Yeah, but and
no, they don't.
2 first-round draft picks.
I mean, I guess they don't, but
many as 2 first-round draft picks would be.
Russ,
you're talking
them
about
trading.
And for Tampa to do it, they can't give away anything that takes away from them possibly winning the Stanley Cup over the next 2 years. So they have to.
But they're going to. I mean,
But Johnson has been hurt. He's been up and down. They feel like they can survive without him.
Okay, well that's fine because that would be one of the guys for sure.
Well, yeah. all I can say is that Eugene Melnick becoming team president of the Ottawa Senators, when he moves into his office, he's bringing a box of TNT because he's blowing this thing up. That the letter that they wrote signifies that. Now maybe they're not trading Mike Hoffman now because there's been some reports that they're pulling back on that, probably because they're not getting what they want in offers. But if they're trading Karlsson, they're going to get 3 or 4 pieces. And they're not going to be concerned about what their short-term future is. It's going to be the long-term goal and the fact that they're cutting payroll significantly. So
they still have to fill spots on the blue line, and the problem is you get Cal Foote, he can't fill a spot on the blue line. That's why you have to get Cuckoo because
For 2 years, probably for 2 years. They're probably going to
probably more. Probably more.
Another person I talked to mentioned Sergachev in this thing. Now, Sergachev obviously he's there. He's who they got for. And at first glance, you're like, okay, that's crazy, but you got to remember you're getting Carlson.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I can't say no way.
You're getting Carlson, so Sergachev, becomes a little bit less important. You're getting Carlson. Now you don't have to give up Johnson. Perhaps you're putting yourself in a better situation long term. And of course, a lot of this would probably be. I mean, you're not just looking at 2 years. You're probably looking at them really trying to get Carlson to stay there for a long, long time.
Sure.
So, that I think that there will be some possible, things that happen later if they sign with him, like that kind of stuff. But I don't think that if he signs with him. So, but now, like I said, the source told me that I was just talking to that said the Green's looking close. So if Green is close, that means that Tampa has punted this to the summer, and that they're taking Green now, and they're going to try to get But I still think they're the team that goes after Carlson in the summer, and
amongst many, yeah,
amongst many, they're the team that has by far the most to gain and the most to give, and the best situation, and also a great place to play. It's not hard to get players to sign in Tampa long term. It's just easy. Florida taxes, throw that in there for money.
It all depends on his agent and what he has his sights on salary wise, because he could be the highest paid player in the game if he wants to be.
He probably will.
Right, and if he's asking for, and let's say he's not asking for max, but let's say he's asking for the most money of any NHL defenseman, which I think still is PK at $9 million. Tampa cannot do that. They're not gonna pay Erik Karlsson more than Victor Hedman. They're not.
Right.
There's a salary structure there. That's why Kucherov is probably a free agent after 2019, because he probably wants to make more than the 8.5 that Stamkos is making, and he's not going to be able to do that in Tampa. Now, maybe he'll take, if he takes the hometown discount, fine, and then there you go. I mean, everybody seems to be interested in doing that to play in Tampa, and you've got the tax situation there. But I'm just saying, it's like
taxes do even things out a little bit. You can play in.
But
yes.
Mike, if you use that logic, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just more saying you've got to look at it from a different perspective. If you use the logic that one, they've got to trade to get Karlsson and give up players. Two, if you want to re-sign them, you've got to essentially take a scorched earth policy to some of your existing players. So you've got 2 years to do that, and then Yzerman's got to say, if we trade for him, we get him for this run and next year. And after that, we have to decide if we're trading him. So if they don't, say they go into the playoffs this year with Karlsson and they don't go far enough, they don't win it. Then they come next year and they're looking strong. He's got another problem, because he's going to have to figure out what to do with Kucherov, how you're going to pay him, and if you're going to re-sign Karlsson. So essentially, you've given up the assets, and if you don't win it this year, you might have to trade Karlsson to someone else next year, because you're going to realize that Kucherov is a more valuable player.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the scenario, is that you bring Karlsson in the short term, it makes you the leading candidate to win the Stanley Cup. But you face that problem in the summer of 2019, and you can say you cross that bridge when you come to it. But okay, you've got a guy in Kucherov who is your player, who's a born and bred Lightning, and he's going to be expecting to make, and he's been the centerpiece of your team, more consistently than Stamkos because he's been healthy. And, he's going to expect massive money because he's one of the best players in the league. And are you going to give a, quote, a mercenary like Karlsson, because he's coming from someplace else, are you going to give him more money than Hedman, give him more money than Stamkos over the guy that you developed and you had in your organization for years? I don't think that's the way Tampa operates. So I think they would be doing with Karlsson what the Rangers did with Keith Yandel, which is trade for a guy for him to be there for the length of his contract and let him go. And I think that mitigates what they would be willing to give up in a trade for him, because I don't think they're going to give up 3 or 4 young assets for a guy that they intend on renting. They would probably want to sign him. And I don't know if Karlsson wants to sign anywhere. He may just want to test the market in 2019.
Yeah. I mean, he might, but if he wins a couple Stanley Cups in Tampa, that also changes things. I mean, it's like that, and the big thing, and it's so funny, I've heard a lot of this for whatever reason, I don't know what GM said. It might have been Hextall, but some GMs have been saying all week. You can't make a big trade at a trade deadline unless that person you're going to trade for is going to guarantee you a Stanley Cup, and that's not going to happen, right? That you can't guarantee a Stanley Cup with anybody. Like you can get Tampa could get Carlson and get eliminated in the first round. Anything's possible, right? So, but he's as close as you can get. I mean, and really it's so funny that GMs are taking that. And one said it, a couple other echoed it. That's never been like the GM way of looking at things ever. That they've always and I think that's more of like an owner's way of looking at things sometimes. But the GMs are always like, what you always hear is let's put ourselves in the best situation to possibly win. That's what you hear. Not and then what happens? You might get hot goaltending. You run into a hot goalie. Whatever it is, you put yourself put the best team on the ice, and you just go from there.
Well, look where the landscape is right now in terms of a few years ago, first round picks were being thrown around like crazy. I mean, not like willy nilly, but the Leafs traded 2 first round picks for Phil Kessel. Martin Hanzal gets a first and a second. It's changed in the span of like 12 months. It's like the only teams that are trading first round picks are teams that are guaranteed to be in the bottom 5 or 6 of the draft, like Tampa. Whoever trades for Jack Johnson is probably going to be a team at the bottom of it. Nobody is trading top picks except for Ottawa when they did with the Duchesne deal, and that could be a disaster of a deal for them depending on where they finish this year. So I mean, the landscape has changed, and that's going to correspond to the deadline, because I don't think Johnson will get a first round pick probably. So will Green, and I don't know if there's much more. Nash.
I don't think Johnson's getting the first round pick.
Well, I mean, then I don't think they're going to trade him. Then I don't think they're going to trade him.
It might be they might be more of a hockey trade than that. That's what I'm saying. I just think that I don't think that even they want. I mean, the issue is when teams are trading for Johnson, the teams that would trade for Johnson are going to be the teams are going to be picking from like 20th to 30th, right? So that's. So that's the issue with that. I think that I don't think any team that has picked lower than 20th is going to give them that for Johnson. But let's go to Peter for some Winnipeg news. And I got one thing really funny, Peter. I wanted to throw out to you before you do that is that Blake Wheeler has suddenly picked up a lot of love for an MVP candidate. And suddenly before talking to people, it's the first time ever. Just this week I've heard it like 3 or 4 times. But
Blake Wheeler is having another Blake Wheeler season, except the Jets are good.
Yeah,
and he's getting some notice on it. But Blake Wheeler is a top 3 right winger in the league. I don't think that's disputable anymore, and it shouldn't be. But what's happening is being the captain now in the second season, we're starting to see a little different side of Wheeler that everyone knew was there. But I mean, the guy is just leading, and he's doing it, despite injuries. He lost his center. He had to play center. He's had rotated line mates for the last month and a half, and he still keeps producing. And now that Scheifele's back, I mean, Wheeler's starting to get points, and he's an assist guy. But he had a 10 or 15 game goalless drought, and he's back on the seat. I mean, he's making things happen again. And even when he wasn't scoring, he was still doing stuff. There's a reason for him to be in the conversation. Will he make it there given some of the other seasons players are having? Probably not.
Yeah.
But he should be in that conversation.
Peter,
go ahead.
Two words: salary drive, because he's eligible to sign an extension on July 1st, and the way he's playing right now, and the integral part of that team that he is and that he's displayed, you're talking $7.5 million on a long-term deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's been this way for a couple of years now. It's not this, like Peter said, this is getting recognition now too. He's had it been strong. So
today in Winnipeg, Paul Maurice sort of updated us a little bit on some injuries, and this is probably going to come into effect as the week goes on. I haven't read it yet, but Pierre LeBrun has done an interview with Kevin Cheveldayoff that just came out today about his trade deadline thinking, and I'm sure there's some interesting stuff in there, but also very vague, because that's typical Chevy.
Sure,
and God bless him, he plays his hands well.
Yes, he does.
But we found out today that Adam Lowry and Brendan Tanev are going on the road trip starting next week, or starting later this week, which is a good sign. and that Jacob Trouba, so the Tanev could be back next week, Lowry could be back early March, and Trouba mid-March. So that would mean shortly after the deadline, within a couple weeks, the Jets have their complete roster back. And I'm wondering how that affects things, because the other noise that's been coming out, and it's starting to come from different people in the media, and I don't know, I mean, it's just funny. You see, when all of a sudden everyone starts saying the same name, and Eck, you know this better than anyone, you take notice, and you're like, well, why is he saying it, or why is she saying it, and how it comes together. But Zuccarello's name keeps popping up from various media members here. And it's not like they're saying, oh, we've heard this. He just pops into conversation where he never did before. And, that could be the coy insider kind of have heard a little bit. Now, I'm not saying I heard anything to, not throw someone off or make an enemy, but that's the kind of player I could see Chevy going after. But given what you just said, Mike, with Wheeler's contract and some other things, there's got to be someone coming out, because they don't have the cap space to do it. As we found out, they have $4.2 million in bonuses that are probably coming due. That leaves them with about $1 million in cap space come the trade deadline. So they're already factoring that in. So things got a lot more complicated for Kevin Cheveldayoff.
And that's the thing with the Jets, is that you have to mitigate the right now what's going on with them. When you look at, they've got a lot of young players coming in. They're going to need those young players because they're cheap. Because all these guys, Line's entry-level deal, his entry-level deal is up after next year, but they're probably going to want to get him locked in on July 1st because it'll probably cost them less. The same with Wheeler. You don't want him getting close to the unrestricted free agency and putting him in a bad negotiating position. Now they're opening up Enstrom. His money falls off. Myers falls off at the end of next year. Maybe they move Myers out. Maybe they entertain trading Bufflin, because Bufflin's a big cap hit. But there's going to have to be some and Connor Hellebuyck's contract is up too. So you're going to have to pay him. Josh Morrissey. Now the one thing with Zuccarello, he gives you another year. He's under contract at under $5 million for another year. But that, where I think Cheveldayoff is going to be hesitant is he going to want to trade one of his young assets? Because that Jeff Gorton is going to be asking for Roslovic or Connor or somebody like that. And I don't see them giving up those guys.
No, those guys, what's happened is that those guys, it's been put out, the story that they're untouchable. They're not going anywhere. And there's no way you're trading Kyle Connor. He's got 21 goals. Roslovic is, while not scoring at the same kind of rate, he is starting to find his own. He is solidified as a second line right winger beside Brian Little. And there's no way they're giving up on him now. It's the Patans, the Marco Danos. Right. I could even see Andrew Kopp being available. And honestly, as much as the Paul Maurice has a huge love for the guy, and lots of fans do too, I could even see Adam Lowry being available simply because he's got to find space somewhere. Chevy's got to find space to because you're not going to give up on Wheeler, and you're not giving up on Line.
Yeah, right.
I would be stunned if the Rangers took a number one in Marco Dano or a number one in Nick Patan for Zuccarello. That's a bridge too far, because as Russ has pointed out a bunch of times, Zuccarello is the best buddy of Henrik Lundqvist. Yeah. So I don't
he may not even be available for all we know, right? And that's the thing. It's just a name that keeps popping up, because the premise right now in Winnipeg is that this isn't just about adding depth. This is about adding the right player who's going to do something better than what you already have. Right. That's the logic that's being talked about now, because a lot of people are saying, do you actually even need to make a deal?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to find something on the interview with Cheveldayoff, and the best quote I found, which is like that we have assets within the organization that we're willing to use, and we have assets within the organization that I will not use. And there you go. So
yeah, and isn't that typical Chevy-esque?
Yeah, that's a Chevyism right there.
Now,
yeah.
Now, just to touch on what just to touch on what you wrote in your blog, Ek. I mean, Bozak did not practice today. They said it was a maintenance day. He's going to play tonight. But it's not out of the realm of possibility regarding a possible trade with him.
I think there's more to this.
Honestly,
I agree with you. And I talked to somebody today who must remain nameless, but who's been hanging out with within that world for a little bit today. And this is more than a maintenance day. That doesn't mean that we'll ever know what else could happen or will happen. But this reminds me of very much of that Peter Forsberg day when he didn't practice with the team, but then came out and took the warm up with the team, and then was traded to the Predators an hour later before this game started. So yeah, I think that. Well, I think there's more to this one. I do.
To that point, he's not getting traded for a second round pick. It's not like a sell deal. The Leafs are trading him. They're getting overpaid in terms of either a top prospect or maybe a conditional first round pick, something like that, because he's a center in a really, really thin center market, and that's the only way that Lou Lamoriello can justify that trade being made to Mike Babcock. Now, maybe he doesn't have to justify anything to Mike Babcock because he's the GM and Babcock's the coach, but if they trade one of his top three centers that the coach is not going to be pleased. That being said, I think if he is dealt, the team they played on Saturday, Pittsburgh, who's looking for that third line center, that's one team, and maybe Columbus. But I think there's still a possibility that Bozak.
You could be playing Pittsburgh. It's very possible.
If they're making this deal, then Lou Lamoriello is of a like mind with me that this team is good. This team's got a lot of talent and a lot of promise, but it's not this year. This year, they were horrific defensively against Pittsburgh on Saturday. They gave up 57 shots against Columbus. They're a good young team, but they're not to the point where they're ready to contend for a Stanley Cup. And I think that's the realization that may be the thought of the franchise if they trade JVR or if they trade Bozak.
I haven't posted this yet because I wanted to get your response. I didn't even tell you this, Mike, yet. This is a rumor I heard today about Toronto because I wanted to get your response right here on the air because this was too good to leave out there. But Luke Schenn.
Yeah, Luke Schenn as a depth defenseman, right-hand shot.
Makes sense, again, doesn't it? it does make sense.
If it's for the price that we said as the market rate, which is a third-round pick, I don't see a problem with it. But I think that. That's only patchwork. That's only I think
it's more like a fourth or fifth privilege. I honestly think that you can get. I think Luke Schenn will be cheaper than Nick Holden. They don't talk about. People are not talking about Jarmelson very much though, and he's like people talk about Jack Johnson. I'd rather have Jarmelson on my team. Like that's if I'm going out there, that's the guy I'd be looking at.
Yeah.
Yes, but the thing is, Jarmelson's got another year in his contract. They can trade him in the summer. He had a long injury. He's not having a good year. Maybe they think the value of him will be better in the summer when they can get past the injury and get past. Yeah.
But he's a playoff guy, that to me, if you look at he's been good in the playoffs. So that to me, playoff defensemen are what I look for. Luke Schenn has a little bit of playoff history too. So there's some. I look at playoff defensemen as always a little bit more valuable than non-playoff defensemen. Where Jack Johnson has not had much of a playoff experience.
I know that a lot of people in Toronto would quibble with what I'm about to say, but I don't know how much Luke Schenn is an improvement over Roman Polak. I don't know how much of an improvement Luke Schenn is over Connor Carrick. So it would basically be a depth move, and I like Luke Schenn, but he's a right-hand defenseman. I think he's more mobile than Polak, but it would be unless it was just a very, very cheap ad. I'm not sure if they would do it.
I think it is a very cheap ad, and I think he's way better than Roman Polak. I would throw that out there. I know I'm not a big Polak fan, but I think that what we've seen with Luke Schenn in the past, and even last year, with LA, just at times, Luke Schenn has shown, he's not that old, for the pedigree of defenseman he was. He never was going to be what Toronto. Yeah, what Toronto wanted to be. Of course, he's never going to be that.
He's only 28 years old, but I mean, your valuation of him and my valuation of him or of Roman Polak are meaningless. It's the valuation of Mike Babcock of Roman Polak, and he loves the guy because he's a veteran and he's not very mobile anymore, but he doesn't make a ton of mistakes, and that's why Babcock loves him.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get it. I do get it. I don't know. I think that's I do think that we could see something. You know, I think Arizona is going to move Shen. I think they're going to move Jarmelson too, and I think Jarmelson's the backup plan for maybe for Tampa. That's what I've heard. You know, like, and I've also heard Jarmelson to Toronto, of course, and I think Toronto would fit really well with Jarmelson.
The only thing
that's somebody backup loves.
The only thing that kills Jarmelson to Toronto is the fact that Jarmelson's a left-hand shot, and you don't think that's that big of a deal, but they already have one left-hand shot playing right defense. And, you know, if they add him, then then they're probably sending Travis Dermott, who's one of their star rookies, down to the minors. And I don't think they really want to do that. But
Babcock has always been about left-hand, right-hand shot. He always has had a big thing. And I you know, I get that too. I'm about that as well. But I think, I mean, put it this way, Jarmelson has always been a left-hand shot. He played on a team in Chicago with a lot of left-hand shooters, played on the right side quite a bit. You know, it's not weird for him to play there, and he's got plenty of experience. He's not going to make mistakes on. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the last thing I want to throw out there today is the Florida Panthers, who are in town where you are tonight, Mike, up there, are turning into a little bit of an interesting team. I mean, we all assume that no one else from that division can make it, and yet Florida is 8 points out right now 6 points out with 4 games.
6 points.
With 4 games ahead and everybody. Yeah. Like Florida has games.
And the most important thing is Luongo came back. Luongo came back on Saturday, won against Calgary. They played Reimer against Winnipeg on Sunday, and he was James Reimer. So as long as Luongo can stay healthy, they have a chance. They played the least amount of games in the NHL, 56, and they have five games. I think 4 games in hand on Carolina and the Islanders, who they're chasing for the wild card spot. So if they stay healthy, and maybe if they add, I know that I think it was Pierre LeBrun who said that he wouldn't be surprised if Florida was in on Max Pacioretty. If they add somebody before the they had somebody at the deadline. Yeah. Then they have a good chance.
Florida likes to go big. They like to go. They like if there's a big name out there, you know. Like I wouldn't be surprised if this summer they're in on Carlson, you know, to be honest. But I think that they like to go. I just don't know if they have the players to pull it off. But they love to go big. They love to make splashes. And you know this especially. I mean, Talon is such a good GM that Talon won't do anything stupid for the short term. But he is also the same kind of guy who he'll push hard and he'll make something happen. He's going to be aggressive. They're going to be buyers at this point. There's no reason they're not buyers. And that's kind of interesting because the other thing they have going for them is they play a lot of games against Detroit, Ottawa, and Buffalo, where the people in the Metro Division aren't playing the Detroit, Ottawa, and Buffalo that often. And that's going to help them. It's going to make Florida a factor in this race. I really do believe that, which in turn then makes first place in the in your division there. In the Atlantic, all that much more important because if Florida gets in, that's the team you want to play in the first round. And in my mind, you're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Mute. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry, no, I'm not. The one thing is that you know they're clearly shooting for the second wild card. They're 19 points behind Toronto.
Right, no, they
have 5 games in hand. But yes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Tampa versus Florida. I mean, the state rivalry would be a tough out for the Lightning. I'm sure.
Pretty much, but that wouldn't be easy. But I think that you know when you look at Tampa, Boston, and Toronto, all within 4 points of each other, this suddenly becomes a little more important than you might have originally thought to get first place.
Who would you rather play? Carolina with questionable goaltending and thin up the middle, but a great defense. But they can't. They're not deep scoring wise. The Islanders, who have great forwards, okay defense, and probably the worst goaltending tandem in the NHL, or Florida, who, if Luongo is healthy, and they have 1, 2, 3, Trocheck, Barkov, Trocheck, and Bukestad up the middle, they're solid. I mean, honestly, and they're scary. I think they would be scary to a team who wins first place.
Yeah, but I'd rather play them than Boston, Tampa, or Toronto.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the options. You know what I mean? So you want to get first place in that division because at the end of the day, if whoever hits second and third is going to be a bloodbath in that division, and whoever finishes second and third, that's going to be a war and a half. I mean, I'm still not. I mean, Boston's played so well. I'm not sold on them yet. I'm like a month away from being sold on Boston. If they continue this throughout, the Boston I've seen before, they have a tough time finishing out the season. And
if they can integrate Holden in and show that he gives them some offense and stuff, there's a reason the teams don't want to play them for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've lost 2 games in regulation in I think 2 months. I mean, I'm convinced.
Yeah. No, they've killed the division. Boston has destroyed the division when they played against other teams in the Atlantic, right? So that's been nuts. So I mean, I still think that as well. So Flyers, Montreal, no Mrazek tonight, just for what it's worth. He's not playing tonight yet. He's going to be here, but not playing yet. So they're going to give Alex the Lion, for your Madagascar fans. He's going to play tonight.
Wow.
And, come on. Alex Lyon. If anybody who has children, Mike, anybody who has children out there, when they think when you say Alex Lyon, it's like that is Alex the Lion from Madagascar.
I've watched Madagascar and thought the movie was hilarious, but I've never gone Alex Lyon, Alex the Lion in my life.
No, there's no way. Like my kids were watching TV. My kids, they follow the Flyers enough to know that the goalies are hurt, and they know people are up there. Like they see that they're like, "Hey, look, Flyers goaltender starting tonight, Alex Lyon." They're like, "Alex the Lion." They're all like freaking out. Trust me, this is a hockey family too. That's you can't be called Alex the Lion and not like he needs to have that paint on his mask. I don't understand it. Like I haven't talked to him yet, but he needs to have that on his mask for sure. And I'm glad he gets another star because I feel bad about it. I think that this is a tough spot for him. This is a tough spot for him because he had a chance. He had a chance here, like to suddenly like prove himself, and then they went out right away and got Mrazek. But hopefully he does get some more shots, and I think the Flyers will give him some more shots. But he's in that weird spot where this is his time to establish himself before Mr. Hart shows up and just takes over the goaltending for the next decade. So Alex the Lion, this is his time. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. We got to end the show, but thank you so much, Peter, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Always. And it's great to get the Western perspective for sure. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Remember that the buzz is just hockey. Talk to you tomorrow.